Okay, good. Thomas isn't here. I'm Steven from Tostemac, and today's autism video is going to be a little bit different than usual. Because in the previous one, I made a mistake.
I sense a disturbance in the force.
Last month, on what to do if you find out you have autism, I misspoke, listing autism as a mental disability when I should have said developmental. It wasn't until a viewer brought it to my attention that I was even aware of it. But rest assured, that mistake has been corrected and that little clip has been permanently removed. Thank God for YouTube Video Editor. But I still felt really bad about it. So I did some research on the matter, and for today's autism video, we will compare and contrast mental and developmental to understand why it's so important to distinguish the two. We'll begin with how the two are defined. Mental disorders are conditions that affect your thinking, feeling, mood, and behavior. They may be occasional or long-lasting, i.e., chronic, and can impact your ability to relate to others and function each day. Some examples include anxiety, depression, eating disorders, bipolar, PTSD, and even personality disorders. On the other hand, developmental disabilities are a group of conditions due to an impairment in physical, learning, language, or behavior areas. These conditions begin during the developmental period, may impact day-to-day functioning, and usually last throughout a person's lifetime. Several cases in point are autism, ADHD, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, Fragile X syndrome, and intellectual disability. On the surface, both disability types appear to be similar in terms of how they influence the way we perform certain tasks and interact with the world around us. But it's also just that. On the surface. Once you read the fine print, you'll see that the two are not so similar as we may have previously thought.
Hold it, Steven. Before we jump into the contrast, why don't we talk about the similarities first?
Sure thing. Just don't tell Thomas I'm here.
I make no promises.
Oh, great. Now then, in regards to how they are similar, mental disorders can have an effect on how we go about our lives in terms of performing tasks and socializing, much like developmental disorders. In addition, both of these can be inherited from our family history within genetics. A developmental disability can be passed down through the family line. Comparably, if a parent or grandparent had a mental disorder like anxiety problems, they could also be potentially passed down to later generations. Although it is crucial to point out that anxiety and depression do not have to be inherited for someone to feel it. We'll go over that in a bit. Finally, in some cases, a mental disorder can last throughout the rest of a person's life, much akin to a developmental disability. From this point onward, the similarities between the two disorder types end, and we start to see how they separate from each other. For starters, most developmental disabilities are only acquired through our DNA. We are born with them. There are some situations where a developmental disability could be obtained after birth, be it either an injury, infection, or other factors. However, that does not apply to all developmental disabilities. You do not get autism from hurting your head or getting an infection. That's not how it works. Plus, these scenarios do not happen as frequently as in the cases of mental disorders.
Wait a minute. Earlier you said things like anxiety and depression can be passed down the family line, much like a developmental disability.
Yes, I did say that, but I also said that one does not need to inherit anxiety or depression from their family in order to experience them. Unlike developmental disabilities, mental disorders can come from plenty more environmental sources. such as having a serious medical condition like cancer, having few or no friends, thus feeling alone and isolated as a result, life experiences including stress or a possible history of abuse, even cases of a traumatic event or brain injury, or if drugs and alcohol were involved somehow. In short, there are more outside sources for someone to get a mental disorder, whereas most developmental disabilities can begin before the baby is even born. Moving on to the next point, a developmental disability is one that stays with you for the rest of your life. You have it from your first day in the world, again with the exception of some cases, all the way to your last day. With mental disorders, it's a different story. We don't necessarily need to be born with them, nor do they always have to stick around permanently. People could end up with a mental disorder as a child, an adult, or even in the elderly years. And if they get the help they need or just be around the right people, a mental disorder doesn't have to overstay its welcome. The last difference has to do with how these two disability types impact our ability to do certain tasks. Mental disorders usually involve emotional factors like moods, feelings, or possible trauma. So people in these situations might not feel like they are up to the task in question. In terms of developmental disabilities, while emotions can play a factor, they are usually not the main factor. A lot of times it would have to do with either not having an understanding of something or struggling to actually complete the task. Autistic people, for example, can have a hard time reading body language, social cues, and maintaining a conversation with someone. It's not that they don't feel like it, rather, they could have a hard time with it due to their developmental disability. As you can see, when we dive into the details of a mental disorder and a developmental disability, we see how these two are so different from one another. Now, I've read across social media that some people are not really bothered too much when the two are mixed up. But to others where it does matter, it's important to understand why. After all, you do not want to put autism in the same category as a mental disorder based on the information we have. It leads a lot to misinterpretation. Not only do you run the risk of comparing autism to a mood or a phase, which it is not, some people like to call mental disorder a mental illness, which is, again, not autism. And there you have it, the difference between mental disorder and developmental disability. I hope you enjoyed it, and for those who saw the original clip when it first aired, I'm sorry. It was an honest mistake. I said one thing when I should have said the other, and I'm thankful that the viewer gave me a chance to correct myself. Now that I've done my due diligence and shared this information with you, I vow to do better in the future. The best part about this, though, Thomas isn't around. Oh, brother! You know, one of these days I'm going to learn to keep my mouth shut. Don't forget to subscribe. Bye!
Found ya, brother!
No, wait, Thomas, I can explain. Just hear me out.
I don't think you can!
No, of course I explained. I mean, I just finished recording the video. I acknowledged a mistake. I did my research on the matter. So
Right! Research my funny behind!
Oh, come on, Thomas. I actually did the research. He'll tell you what, when the video's done edited, I'll show it to you, you know?
What, so I could see 30 minutes of wasted time?
No, it's not 30 minutes of wasted time. It's like an hour.
Your research is on Wikipedia!
Oh, come on. No, that's an insult. Wikipedia is useless. I use actual sources.